had no idea what role-playing games were, but I was in a game store and I was holding on to a war game that I was about to purchase when I saw on the counter this box, Dungeons and Dragons, with the blue box set, it's called. And on impulse, without having any idea what it was, I just put down the board game, picked up the dragon box, and bought it. And that was how I got in. There were so few people that played. Nobody knew how to buy. I went back to my school, and nobody knew anything about this game. And so I tried to figure it out by reading the rules. The rules of Dungeons and Dragons in those days was just incomprehensible. It took me a long time before I understood the basic idea of a role-playing game, right? I was playing it like a board game for several months.
Well, I think that's pretty normal, because I think at the time that's what was available, were just board games. And so this was really something more. This was more than just moving your pieces here and there. This was interaction and role playing all together. So it's sort of, it was very new. It's very groundbreaking at the time. Yeah. So that makes total sense. Yeah. Do you want to ask the next question? Yeah. Or okay.
Sure. So what edition did you start playing with?
AD&D. Well, technically D&D, original D&D. But it very quickly went to AD&D. Kind of didn't really know. It didn't feel like, new editions. What I don't know. But there was like, we were playing something that I now, looking back, realized was original Dungeons and Dragons. And then the monster manual when AD&D came out, the first book wasn't the Player's Handbook. The first book was the Monster Manual, was the one that came out. And so we got the Monster Manual, and we didn't quite, we were trying to figure out how it worked, but we're used to that because this whole game is trying to figure out how it works. And then the Player's Handbook came out, called the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It didn't so much feel like in the new edition as it felt like, oh, here's like, we're just going to go deeper into the system, right, from what it was. And when we got the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook, oh my God, that was like, wow, like, whoa, this is so cool, so neat. And then the DMG and stuff like that. And I played D&D, and then it didn't take long before I started, adding house rules and making changes because, the rules out of the box were so bad that everybody made it house rules and changes to the rules.
That's fun. Yeah, just some homebrew content.
Yeah, I think you guys were the original homebrewers.
Oh yeah, because and it was normal to want to change the rules. I know nowadays it's not as chic or cool to change the rules, but we didn't need a reason to change the rules. It's just like when you would go to play D&D, D&D took off and different people started their campaigns. Everybody had so much variation how to play, and you're like, oh, we're going to go over to Chris's campaign, and he's got like, instead of 6 stats, he's got like 19 stats. Oh, wow, that's cool. All right, let's do it. And did it make sense? Whatever. It was just part of the flavor. The rules and the world together were the flavor of what that game was like. And every game was different because everybody made changes. That was cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more flexibility, you know what I mean? And I think that gives you a lot more opportunities to be innovative and creative. And I think that sounds great. Yeah. It sounds like a lot of fun.
It was.
They should be more creative. Yeah. He's gonna, and then you can the paper.
Yeah. Have you ever DM'd, or have you just stayed a player?
Oh, I mostly DM'd. Because I didn't know anybody that played, I had to teach people to play, right? Like it was of several months of playing Dungeons and Dragons with people who none of us knew what we were doing. Of course, I'm learning it as we're going, and then eventually I found a group who played, and I got to play under a DM with more experience for the first time, and that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing, and then kind of, the Dungeons and Dragons was exploding. I mean, on a really tiny scale, but it was like growing, and more people getting into it, and different people had campaigns, and we were jumping around. So there was a lot of playing here, DMing for these people, playing over here, moving characters around from campaign to campaign, and it was a ton of fun. But I ended up I just have more. I guess I was more obsessed than most of the people there, and so I was DMs would come and go, but I just kept DMing. So I DM'd a lot for the first couple decades that I played D&D.
Wow, that's fun. We had a follow-up question with that. Do you still DM it or go into any campaigns from time to time?
Yeah, so I have a homebrew campaign which are called Chaldea, which I'm developing for possibly for print or something someday. I don't know. Maybe it's just a hobby. But yeah, I have my own fantasy world, and I DM it, and I also play. But I do more DMing than playing.
Awesome.
Oh, that's really fun.
It's amazing. Still do it to this day.
Yeah.
What type of worlds do you like to play or like create?
Yeah, I've been creating the same world since 1980. I mean, I very quickly after I started playing D&D started creating Chaldea, and because I started in the 70s with original, it very much reflects what fantasy was like at that time. You know, it was very gritty, very violent. It's all sort of the traditional, you know, elves and dwarves and giants and undead, and you know, all it you know, my world feels very much like Dungeons and Dragons because, but it reflects those sorts of things, and yeah, that's the basic idea is that the world was taken over by a demigod Set, and this demigod was an evil dude, and then somebody offed him, but nobody offs him. Nobody knows who did it, and so it's kind of set in the wake of like there was this big empire, and then the emperor died, and then everything just crumbles into chaos because even though he's a bad dude, there was a lot of law and order, and now everybody's running around trying to figure out what to do.
That's pretty in-depth.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I teach history, so when you're talking about that, that sounds like the Roman Empire when the Roman Empire collapsed and all of Europe was all of a sudden a bunch of small weak kingdoms, and the Vikings came in, and so there was just a lot of chaos. Which I mean, at the time for those people, it was probably horrible.
Yeah,
but
sure.
From a historical perspective, 1,000 years later, that it's really cool to look at. So is that what your campaign is?
I wasn't conscious that I didn't have a parallel to
Sure.
Rome. I mean, I loved history. I mean, I could have, but I think to me, when you're DMing, you're creating a world, you're running games. You always have to think of like what's the plot or what's the hook? Like what are adventurers doing in this world, and why is there adventure to be had? Why are there places where there are monsters running around and stuff like that? And so I like the idea of a recently assassinated emperor because of the chaos that it throws things into. And then this emperor had also taken various places and posted guardians to keep out the really bad horrors of the world. Like, oh, there's this really bad demon that lives in here, and okay, we're going to place a guardian there. So he locked up all these places with these guardians. But when he died, all these guardians abandoned their posts and went to him to protect him even in death. And so
wow.
now you have all these places where, what the